You're listening to Mount Hermeneutics, where three Marines give their perspective on God, faith, and spirituality with a heavy lean on the Divine Council worldview. This is not your grandma's Sunday school, nor is it always for the Christian faint of heart. Nothing about who we are or what we say make us experts. But you better believe we'll have a take, and perhaps it won't suck. Brian, no means no.
For at least for 24 hours, we're not friends.
That's
At least 20,
a bad take.
maybe like 48.
Look outward, not inward, Brian, for sure.
It's a podcast. I'm supposed to talk about stuff. What do you want? Doing my job, man.
All right, boys. Welcome to Mount Hermeneutics. It's Matt with my two co-hosts, Andre and Brian. We're going to be talking about. It's a different podcast, so there's a little bit of a disclaimer on this one. This one's a parental advisory notice. If we've got any young chillins out there, go away. This is probably going to be above your age,
as opposed to our usual G-rated fare.
Absolutely, yeah, but this whole thing's going to be, a little bit wild. So if you're under the age of 18, hit the stop button and come back after your birthday, and we'll be happy to have you back, or go find your parents and have them listen along.
I don't plan on getting too.
Bro,
I think the general ideas are adequate to touch upon without.
We'll see what happens.
Graphic detail, but I guess so we don't get sued. Good.
Here we are with Brian, our theological badass. You got Matt, who pulls the levers and pushes the buttons and brings the funny. And anyway, so what we got is some socials that are up, and we'll give you all that contact information at the end. But for now, go ahead, leave a comment, and share the show with your friends, and buckle up, because we're about to talk drugs, sex, and magic.
Right on. Oh, and Dre, before we get started, I want to say a thank you for jumping on those socials for me. I know we're still a young program and there's a lot of moving parts, but I've been dragging my feet on some of the other back-end production pieces. So for those at home, Dre's stepped up and taken on the socials. So if you get into any engagements with our official handles, either on Instagram or X or Facebook, you'll be most likely engaging
the artist formerly known as Twitter,
with the Andre Bibbs behind the scenes. So if you get into a little Twitter beef, don't be surprised when you get your feelings hurt, like you're talking to the Wendy's app. But tread lightly and carefully, but bring it.
Yeah, for sure.
So Brian, how you feeling, buddy?
Meh.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Yeah.
I got, for the kids at home, I had a work trip, came back with a little something, some COVID like bug. I don't know. I just felt crappy.
A little vid adjacent.
Yeah. Hey, and also thanks, Dre, seconding all of Matt's thanks. I felt kind of bad for dragging my feet on that stuff, but then,
it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're good. I just thought I'd take it and maybe have some fun with it. So once we start populating it.
For those that don't know, Dre's youngest daughter is a little bit of a social media famous person, so he's got a little in-house support there. Also, I'm sure he's getting some help. So appreciate that from the whole Bibbs household digging in.
About to get it in. So it's funny too, because the social media child is the one that probably least agrees with anything that's said on the show.
Right.
So, yeah,
we'll turn her around.
Yeah, we'll see.
Or we'll have her on as a recurring dissenting voice, right?
I'm sure she is too. So
right on.
We kind of dissent from each other enough to kind of cover that,
but not big picture.
Right.
Okay.
Right. She I don't want to over plant the seeds, whatever, but she's liable to be the most, diametrically opposed to the bulk of what we talk about and what we collectively agree on. But she might surprise us too.
Yeah, right. I don't think that it's beyond the too far to say that she's stepped away from that environment. So from this environment, if you will.
Yeah, well, maybe we can. Maybe we'll use some of our conversation points and drag her back.
Yeah, for sure.
So we mentioned. So Dre kind of teased it. Said we're talking about blood, sex, and magic. I'm wearing a. For those that can't see, I'm wearing a Hellfire Club shirt, a la Stranger Things. And we've tapped on this subject a couple of times, and I think we kind of wanted to dive in and get deep into the specifics, or maybe some of the details around some of the things. We keep alluding to Aleister Crowley and a few of the other individuals, and that's kind of where we're going to go tonight. So, like Dre said, buckle up. I think this one should be interesting. If nothing, this should be entertaining. So yeah.
And I think that Brian will actually give it some merit on who this was and where it started and how it's relevant today. So, to put a serious angle to this. Boo, but yeah, I think
serious.
We need to make it relevant. It'll be good.
So where do we start, guys? Should we start with Crowley? Do we start with D? Do we go back to the beginning and start with like the Garden of Eden and the fall? I mean, it's all interlaced, right? Like, what's the easiest way to tie this all together and start going?
I think the main thing for our purposes is how this ties into the Divine Council worldview. And just to review, the main idea of the Divine Council worldview centers on that weird little passage in Genesis 6 about how the sons of God went into the daughters of men and had offspring by them, the Nephilim. And the Book of Enoch expands upon this and talks about how these 200 beings called the Watchers descended on Mount Hermon, and they're these what we would call angels today. And they swore a pact to for those at home who, I guess we don't have video in any of our.
Not yet.
Yeah.
We will soon.
Dre did a great impression of the Ancient Aliens guy, but yeah. So you've got divine beings ascending on Mount Hermon and swearing a pact to engage in this act of rebellion together, by which they take human women for sexual partners and give humanity all of this forbidden knowledge. And then at the tower, and then this corrupted the earth. God flooded the earth, and then humans gathered to build the Tower of Babel, which was a ziggurat, which was a basically a man-made sacred mountain to invite the Watchers to return to give them this forbidden knowledge. And the Bible kind of talks about a lot of this somewhat indirectly and euphemistically. We know about most of this from ancient Near Eastern literature, like the Enuma Elish and stuff about the Upkalus and Anunnaki, and the Book of Enoch, of course. But so basically you have this pattern that plays out in the Near East, wherein humans seek the favor of these lesser gods that God had given humanity over to at the Tower of Babel. And this is the basis for magic and astrology and a lot of the idolatry of the Middle East. And it led to that influence led to a lot of weird sexual stuff. And you kind of see this in the Bible when it talks about Baal and Ishtar worship, shrine prostitution, how the land was dotted with Asherah poles. Those were basically, like, ancient Near Eastern religion was very porn based. And I don't want to get into too many details, but
I do.
Well, all right.
Sounds
Why
like
we're here, baby.
I mean, all the things you said. I mean, I heard you basically give the biblical basis for stripper poles, right? Like, I mean, there's all kinds of weird things in there that you just hit on. But
so
go ahead.
Okay. Well, speaking of details, Asherah poles, these were phallic symbols. Like, these were when the Bible talks about how they turned aside to the Baals and Ashtoreths, and the land was filled with groves of Asherah poles. Well, these were giant phalluses that were filling the land. If you look at the this isn't exactly ancient Near East, but if the ruins of Pompeii that have been preserved pretty well because of the volcano, as they've dug through all that and excavated it, and there are penises on everything, like decorative penises all over the place. They were obsessed with penises.
It's like a Marine Corps.
I was about to say the same thing. It was like a Marine Corps base.
It's like there's penises everywhere on cars.
There's just Lance Corporals running around with Sharpies.
Right.
Sharpies
It's Pompeii.
and white spray paint.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know, and I'm assuming that a good chunk of our listener base are military and Marines, for the uninitiated, Marines also have a strange obsession with penises. And we, for whatever reason, find them graffitied all over everything in the fields and in the deserts and whatnot. So,
well, we wear them on our sleeves. I mean, that's what I mean. Chevrons are, some would argue, are phallic symbols.
I think it comes from a lot of 18-year-old boys who leave home for the first time and then they're thrust into a shower with 80 other dudes.
You said thrust.
With nothing but penises all around, and then they have to, nuts a butt and stuff of that nature. Yeah. It just becomes you just become, penis. More penis.
This isn't really where I saw this conversation going, but
that's why we're here, Brian.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was very ancient Near Eastern religion, very sexual based. But of course, it wasn't limited to that because Pompeii wasn't the ancient Near East. But that's a pretty good example of ancient thinking and their obsession with sex, and their religion was tied up in that.
Hey, Brian, hang on. So ancient. So you made a comment. Pompeii was an ancient Near East, but for the uninitiated, Pompeii was a long ass time ago. So what's the generally accepted parameter for what constitutes the ancient Near East relative, and then the not so ancient but still old East? Like what's the differentiator there?
Like geographically?
No, time wise.
Well, I'm talking about like Old Testament period, like ancient Egypt and
right. But I mean, New Testament would still be A&E, right?
Yeah, definitely. But specifically, I mean, you kind of have, with the Greek and Roman empires, you didn't have as much of the ancient Near Eastern influence to draw upon as for examples here, but it was still pretty raunchy.
And I think the ancient Near East stuff is kind of pre-Greek Empire, so it would be like the Akkadians and Babylon and things of that nature.
So like up until like early to mid Rome. I mean, I'm not trying to be too precise. I'm just, because to me, I when you made the comment that Pompeii wasn't ancient Near East, I'm like, I mean,
it's Rome, right?
I mean, to me, it's we're still talking about that same world, right? And it's that region that in my brain, I'm thinking centurions came and went, right? Like they went and did tours down in Jerusalem area, and then they went back up to Rome. So they would have brought the
Sure, but I mean,
a pole idea with him, right? It's kind of thing.
So,
that's all I was just thinking. There's probably some linkage there that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so you had the Assyrian Empire first, probably around. What would be the dates? Around like 800 to 600-ish BC, and then the Babylonians rose to power, but they're very similar. They kind of worship the same milieu of gods, albeit named differently.
Did you say milieu of gods?
Yeah, I did. Okay. So
let me trying to highbrow the conversation up by using fancy words to offset all of Dre's penises.
That's exactly it.
I feel
because penises are the milieu of the Marine Corps since 1994.
Okay,
probably
so when you
beyond.
So we've talked. You guys know about the sacred bed of Marduk. We've talked about that before.
We did talk. You should probably give a high level recap in case folks are tuning in for the first time.
Okay, so when Moses led the Israelites to conquer Og, king of Bashan, and Bashan is kind of a has some demonic underworld connotations, but the writer, is it in Numbers or Deuteronomy? Anyway, they mention the dimensions of Marduk's iron bed, and I don't remember the exact dimensions, but they're huge. Dr. Michael Heiser points out that these are the exact dimensions of the sacred bed of Marduk. Marduk was the Babylonian storm god. He was the chief god of the Babylonian pantheon. The ziggurat of Enemanaki, which most scholars agree is the basis for the Tower of Babel. Like the tower they're trying to build in Genesis 11, that became the ziggurat of Enemanaki, a sacred mountain. Atop of the ziggurat was the sacred bed of Marduk. So of course, why was the storm god Marduk in their conception descending to the top of the ziggurat for a bed? Was it to take a nap, or, well, it was for ritual sex? And and this is kind of a good example of ancient Near Eastern religion, how it revolved around sex. Priestesses would go up and kind of be offered to the god for his enjoyment. Baal and Ishtar worship. They would enact sex in the temple. They would basically put on porn shows to arouse the gods. The thinking was that when it was Baal was the storm god, Ishtar or Astarte or Ashtoreth, depending on the region or dialect, it's all the same goddess. She was the earth goddess. The thinking was that when it was raining, this was Baal having sex with Ishtar. The rain was his seed that penetrated her and fertilized the crops. And so if there was a drought, well, the gods weren't in the mood, so they would have these basically this sacred porn shows to arouse the gods. And that's why the land was dotted with Asherah poles. And you kind of have this tendency of them exalting sex to this, deifying it, turning it into an idol, which of course leads to surplus babies, which of course offers an outlet for that is child sacrifice to Moloch. And so it was, rather than anything enticing or arousing, this was basically a horror show. So when you read in the Old Testament about how God was so furious with the Israelites for turning aside to Baal and Ishtar worship, well, this was why. And so you have that pattern of humans seeking the watchers, seeking to the favor of these lesser gods, and that influence leads to this sexual perversion. And and as we've discussed before, once you kind of understand those passages in the book of Genesis, what's going on in Genesis 6, Genesis 11, the rest of the Bible basically explodes with meaning, because it's there throughout it. When like in Colossians, when Paul condemns the worship of angels, he's talking about this kind of practice. And so as church history went on, you didn't hear that much about this. Well, let me back up a little bit. As I was telling, I think I mentioned this to you guys while we were like after the part that we recorded for the show. Since I learned about the divine council worldview, like I thought I understand the Bible pretty well in Western history, and I did a lot of reading in Western occultism and esoteric tradition and mysticism, and I thought I had a pretty good handle on it. But once I discovered Heiser and the divine council worldview, it's like all of it was this big, long M. Night Shyamalan movie. Like there was this twist ending now, and like now that I see it, reviewing everything, I realized that's kind of always there.
Yeah. It's hiding in plain sight kind of thing, right?
Right. But like it's kind of driven me to go back and review all of the stuff I've read, like particularly in Western occultism, particularly John Dee and Hermetic alchemy and all this stuff. And it's kind of like the same patterns we see in the Old Testament with the Mount Hermon and the Tower of Babel, we kind of see in Western occultism. Angel magic was kind of a big deal in medieval and Renaissance magic, particularly with John Dee, and then later with Aleister Crowley, and you kind of see the same patterns play out. I'm kind of...
But by patterns, you're talking about the idea of like the human trying to do things, kind of going up in their level of knowledge and then having like a disastrous end, like to simplify it, or are you talking about something different? What do you mean by
talking
patterns?
Specifically about seeking the this forbidden, this secret knowledge from angels, and then it leading to weird sex stuff.
Right.
What I infer from Genesis 6 and 11 and the overall pattern we've discussed is that, you know, the spiritual forces of darkness in the heavenly realms with whom we are at war, like that they hate humanity, and they hate God for choosing humanity to be his image bearers, to rule creation, and to rule as God's regents. One of the things they hate about us and they're most jealous of is our sexuality. Not just the sex act, although obviously from Genesis 6, that's something they covet, but our ability to create life, to reproduce. As far as we know, spiritual beings can't do that. And, you know, creating the Nephilim, you know, which were, you know, unnatural, you know, we don't get a physical description other than their great size, but they were, you know, that they were violent, menacing creatures, and that you know, basically brutalized the earth wherever they went. And
imagine a bunch of pissed off Andre the Giants.
Except like 10
Kane,
feet tall.
that's what it was.
I mean, if they were just Andre the Giant size, right? Or you know, any of those other, you know, professional wrestler, freak of nature,
The Big
Shaquille
Show.
O'Neal, the Big
Yeah,
Show.
right.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if those three dudes walked into a bar together. And they just decided they wanted to fight everybody. Like, it'd be a bad day, right? But then an army of them, like, wow.
Right,
But I
yeah.
get your point. I mean, ostensibly they were larger than that. I don't know. I mean, again, I don't want to get into quibbling over the specificities and, you know, measurement perfections that are in some of the Old Testament writings, right? So they were big. Maybe they were 10 feet tall. Maybe they were 8.5 feet. Maybe they were just, you know, big. But regardless, when you have an entire, you know, chunk of people like that, it's a pretty staggering visual.
And you know, and I'm speculating here, but the fact that this was an unnatural union between divine and human natures that led to these monsters, like what I suspect is that God wasn't angry about it just because of the menace they posed to humans, but for the cruelty to the Nephilim themselves. Like I'm thinking of like a purebred dog, like a bulldog. I think breeding bulldogs at this stage is cruel because they're so inbred. Their snouts are too short to breathe. They have back problems. They're just these little just crimes against nature.
I agree, by the way.
Yeah.
100%.
That's kind of what Nephilim were. I don't think it was fun to be a Nephilim. Like, it was an unnatural thing where like they weren't happy to be there. Like, it was kind of a condemnation to be born as this. But the angels were so jealous of our ability to reproduce that they did it anyway because of, I don't know, their jealousy for.
Yeah, I guess that's definitely one way to think about it. I got to think that their existence was, you know, a problem for a lot of reasons. One, what you say could be true. Like maybe it was just hard for them to get full, right? Because there wasn't enough things that they could eat that were the right size that produced the kind of, what would their caloric intake requirements be? It'd be massive, right? Maybe, I'm having like water boy quotes in my head, mama say Nephilim so angry because they got all them teeth and no toothbrush, right? But like, there's so many things that could be problematic for that. But obviously, in a broad cosmological, order sense, right? It imbalanced everything, right? So that was a problem. That was clearly problematic. But I wonder, so it's an interesting theory that you've got about the angels being jealous, because all we get from the Bible is that they saw women to be beautiful, right? Which that leaves us with, conjecture and all that kind of stuff. And I don't disagree with you, by the way. It definitely could be. The jealousy has always been portrayed in any kind of pop culture, right? All of the movies that I've ever seen, books, whatever, about angels,
and
there's always that jealousy angle, right?
And I'm basing a lot of this on, and I'll get into more detail as we go on. But today I just reviewed all of Crowley's 30 aethers, these 30 rituals that he underwent based on the Enochian magic of John Dee and Edward Kelly, by which it's these rituals that were done to induce these visions that were meant to transform his consciousness, to bring about the Aeon of Horus, which is this next age of human history that Crowley believed he had this messianic role in bringing about, or at least he said he believed. But when you look at, and by the way, I don't recommend anybody read this stuff. It's perverse. It's not a good time.
But the links will be in the description below for all those books.
I guess that was going to be my question. What's the point? Right. So here we are, we have these jealous beings, and because perhaps the creative nature of what sex is, but also you have the emotional side of sex and the spiritual side of sex that we forget to talk about today in modern thinking and culture. And so where is the power in that? So what? So okay, so some angels came down, they wanted to have sex with humans. Cool. But now that, thousands of years later, you have a John Dee, you have an Aleister Crowley that want to get back to this and find out what's missing. What's the point? Why do they need to do these sex rituals, and what does that actually bring them? And what power of angels or aliens, or because Crowley will call things even aliens, even the Greys, Lamb, ripping space portals and all kinds of nonsense that happened back then.
That is a very good question, and I'm glad you asked it, because I was beginning to wander off and
ramble. And I kind of felt that you were wandering off. So I'm just like, what's the power in that? Why do we have that? Why do we need to have sex?
Why do we, or why do
why do they? I guess why is a sex ritual so important?
I think
to give
for
you
them,
power here, because there's no way that a priest like these humans are going to perform these rituals without getting something out of it other than just getting off, right? Because it was super hedonistic. It was super bisexual and orgies and lots of sounds like a good time in the 1920s. But
yeah,
what do they get out of it?
The sex itself is not necessarily the point. I think the point is perverting us. It's distorting and mutilating the image of God in us. And
I think maybe from the angel's point of view, but if I'm a Thelian priest, what about the sex act actually takes me to another plane? I mean, you also add in the drugs, right, to get your mind into a different spot. But what is it about the sex particularly that helps you get to that thing? It's almost like a different type of meditation, right?
Hang on before you answer that, Brian. Okay. So Dre, I gotta ask you a clarifying question. What's a Thelian priest?
I think Brian's gonna have to answer that, but That's the
Crowley's religion.
the
Thelema.
Thelemite, like
Like
a Vegemite sandwich,
Thelema.
but more of a Thelemite sex act.
Yeah,
So,
and that's
I'm just trying to make sure we keep all the terms clarified.
Okay.
So
I thought that term
explain
would come up
this-
again. So
yeah, it's going to come up, and I'm to explain this. I need to lay out some basic principles, and you guys are going to get mad at me at first, and you're going to want to interrupt me.
and we are so.
But
we will. So
Okay.
carry on.
But this might sound like I'm over promising here, but what I'm about to say, if you hear me out on this, you guys, the listeners, you will have the key to understanding all magic and religion and all of human history.
Penn and Teller just got really interested.
Not like stage magic, but magic in the sense Crowley used.
I know what you mean.
Well, he spelled magic with a K.
I'm not quite sure that David Blaine's not a demon. So
Yeah,
carry on.
David Blaine's like, shut the fuck up, Brian.
I think David might be a Nephilim himself. So
Okay, so when we speak of the occult just means hidden, but it means a lot of different things.
So it's the same. It's the same root as occlude.
What's that?
Is it the same root? The etymology, is it tied to the word occlude? Is that what you mean by hidden?
Probably, yeah. But
you're the English major. I just made an assumption.
When we speak of the occult, we mean one of a number of meanings, but that are not necessarily the same. But there's enough overlap that we tend to conflate them when we talk about the occult. There's it's occult. It's hidden in the sense that like the sense that an ancient mystery religion was like you have to be initiated into the secret society to learn the secrets, and it's deliberately kept hidden. But then there's a cult in another sense in which there are hidden truths that are just intrinsic to nature. And when we talk about how science grew out of magic, medieval and Renaissance magic, that's the sense we're talking about. Like they were trying to discover the occult knowledge of the universe to understand the universe as an integrated system of cause and effect. But one of the other pursuits that goes under the name occult that isn't necessarily either of those two things is that there was the belief that there was a perennial religion, like a universal ultimate religion that unifies all religions, that you can go back, if you go back far enough in time to the ancient Egyptians and even the Atlanteans or Lemurians, the civilizations that predated Egypt, they had this perennial philosophy, and much of medieval and Renaissance occultism was dedicated to finding that. And this would be a way to understand those secrets of the universe that would bestow all of this secret power that secret societies are in pursuit of by their rituals and initiations and all that stuff. And so those aren't the keys to understanding all magic and religion yet, though. We're not quite there. I'm just laying the groundwork. The one thing that all ancient religions have in common is that they all recognize that the human condition as it is a problem to be solved. They all recognize there's something wrong with life as we find ourselves in it, and they seek to resolve that. The problem essentially is mortality. It's death. We seek permanence. We don't want to die. And so they offer a remedy for that. And that's where the similarities end. You guys have heard me, we've talked about this before, how there are really only two religions in the world.
Mm-hmm. Two types of religions, yeah.
I would say there are two religions in the world, and everything else is either an offshoot or a subset or a heresy or a syncretization of one or both of those two religions. In this, I say this with regard to answering that question of the providing the answer to the problem of the human condition. We seek permanence, but life is temporary, and we want to resolve that. Those two religions offer two competing answers on what is eternal and permanent. Well, let me back up. The one thing all religions have in common in terms of solving that problem is they recognize the problem of the human condition, and the solution to it is to find out what's permanent and eternal. And by aligning ourselves with that, by conforming ourselves to what is eternal, we gain a measure of eternality and immortality. And that's what enlightenment is understanding and identifying with the eternal to escape the temporary, which means you, by necessity, you have to detach yourself from what is transitory and fleeting and align with the eternal. And that's how you get that eternality of your own. You guys follow so far?
Mm-hmm.
You guys are being uncharacteristically attentive and not interrupting, and it makes me nervous. So there's that. Dre just jumped at the camera to startle me, and it worked a little bit. But so that's principle 1 of 3. The two religions in the world they both answer the question of what is eternal differently. Western traditional monotheism says that God alone is eternal and the universe is contingent upon him. It's a product of him. God alone is eternal, and we can find immortality and enlightenment by aligning ourselves with God. Eastern religion has it that the universe is eternal and all life and consciousness and the gods themselves arose from within it. And Hinduism is probably the most developed version of this, and identifies the universe as God. But like other pagan religions that basically see the gods in terms of being personified forces of nature, like Thor is the storm god, Zeus is the storm god, Apollo is the sun, Poseidon is the ocean, so on and so forth. Hinduism and Judeo-Christian tradition, they both answer this question very differently, about what is eternal and how enlightenment is to be found. In the book of Genesis, you see God creates the universe by by the distinction of opposites. He separates light and darkness to create time, separates above and below to create space, separates dry land from water to create earth, so on and so forth. And at each stage, he says, it is good. And at the end of it all, he looks at all of creation and says, it is very good. So put a pin in that. Hinduism, on the other hand, sees the goal of Hinduism, or their view of the human condition, is that we're trapped in this cycle of samsara. We live, we die, we're reborn over and over again. As we go through our life after life after life, we accumulate good karma or bad karma. If we're born in this life as a cockroach, if we're a really good cockroach, we might be a rat in the next life. If we're a bad king in one life, we might be reincarnated as a pauper, depending on our karma. But overall, this is the cycle of samsara. It is itself a curse. It's something to be escaped entirely and the way that they offer to do this is by realizing that your individual identity is an illusion. That everyone and everything is Brahman, and if you can understand and actualize your identification with Brahman, you abolish your individual ego, and then when you die, you're reabsorbed into Brahman. You lose your individual identity. You guys follow so far?
Mm-hmm.
Have I bored you yet?
No.
Do you kind of see how these are opposite and antagonistic to each other?
Yeah.
I feel like I skipped over details, so I'm not.
No, there's no details you skipped over. It makes total sense, but okay. So what's principle 3?
That was principle 3.
Well, what
principle
was 2?
2 was, okay. Principle 1 was how they all have this one principle in common. Principle 2 was this is how the West sees it. God is eternal.
Oh, and
The
principle
universe is
3 is the
contingent.
opposite of that.
And principle 3 is the universe is eternal, and all consciousness and individuality is contingent upon that. And so, but just to kind of flesh this out a little more, in Christianity, death is the enemy, and it's solved by resurrection, where we're raised again in glorified bodies, and we live forever on a renewed earth. Because, as the book of Genesis says, God saw that it was very good, and so this is something He values: human life, differentiation, the created order. This is all very good and something God wants to preserve. In Hinduism, it's an evil. It's a curse to be escaped, and the goal is to escape from that differentiation and to be reabsorbed into the one, into the undifferentiated collective consciousness,
the cosmic force,
right? Or Brahman, the world soul, but. So, a lot of people talk about how they'll say things like all religions are essentially the same. They just have superficial differences. This is absolutely untrue. Apart from that one thing they have in common, recognizing the problem of the human condition, they are fundamentally opposed. They're actually opposites. Now, if we take that into consideration and look at what the Bible says about this cosmic war that we're in, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, the powers, the principalities, the spiritual forces of darkness in the heavenly realms. There, as we read in Psalm 82, God has pronounced a sentence of death upon them. We read in the book of Revelation how at the end they'll be judged and cast into the lake of fire. But for now, they do rule the world, and their goal, they know they can't win. They know their goal is to prolong the war as long as possible, to keep the gospel from spreading, the church from triumphing over and winning the nations back for Christ. As long as they can do that, their execution is stayed. So, and the reason this is important is if you look at like all of occult tradition, first of all, this pursuit of the perennial philosophy, as if we don't already have the true religion in Christianity, that serves to delay the end. That serves to hamper the church. But also, if you look specifically to like a lot of the occult tradition that followed after John Dee and the Rosicrucians, like have you guys read about the Theosophical Society founded by Helen Blavatsky? She was one of Crowley's influences.
That doesn't sound familiar. The Rosicrucians, yeah, but I mean, no.
Okay. Well,
it sounds a little familiar. Like, I mean, there's a tree of Crowleyites. So,
well, she was an influence on Crowley. One of many.
So before,
right.
Okay.
But it's basically just warmed over Hinduism. Really, if you look in all New Age religion, all occultism, like if you read Crowley, it's full of it's got all this biblical language. It's full of all of this inside jargon, and part of being initiated into these secret societies is learning all the jargon, figuring out what all the symbols mean, unpackaging it, seeing how everything fits together. If you boil it down to its essence, it's basically just Hinduism. It's basically just this idea of abolishing your individual ego, and escaping the cycle of samsara.
It's also, isn't that also somewhat related to Taoism? I feel like, because I'm not super,
Yeah,
I'm not well read
the,
on Hinduism, but I read a little bit of Taoism, and it feels like that was a big part of it, was the whole thing of your existence is your cross to bear, which, by the way, isn't entirely far from core Judaism, right?
In what sense?
Well, Jews believe that, and I'm simplifying this, right? But they don't believe in the concept of hell the same way that Christians do. And they believe that their existence is their punishment and their hell, and that they have to just simply survive and make it through so they can go on because they're the chosen people and they're going to go be with God after they die. Right?
Well,
again, I'm super simplifying, but at the very, very high level, that's Judaism, right?
Well, Judaism is, I mean, they believe the Messiah is going to come and set up God's kingdom on earth. I mean, this idea.
I get that part, but I'm just talking about as it relates to what we were talking about. Like that, don't overcomplicate my answer. I said very, very, very simple. They don't believe it's possible for them to go to hell. They believe this is their hell, and that once they're done, they serve their time and then they move on.
I disagree with that. Okay. I don't think that's what most Jews would say, at least what most traditional Orthodox Jews would say. They believe in the resurrection from the dead at the end of history. Mm-hmm. Now,
again, I don't know what that has to do with what I said. You're disagreeing, but you're offering a point that has no contrary concept to what I said.
Because those are opposing concepts. Like
no, they're not.
The biblical idea of,
do Jews believe they go to hell?
I reject the premise of the question.
On what grounds?
Well, it depends on how you define hell. Because
I'll use more words. Do Jews believe that there's a lake of burning fire that they could potentially spend eternity in if they're not good Jews?
They believe in a final judgment in which you can be separated from God for all of eternity. Yes.
Do they believe in a lake of fire?
Do Christians believe that?
I mean,
I'm sure there's
God?
I think there's subsets of Christians that believe there's a lake of fire where you eternally burn, right? But is that
all the
really
preachers that I grew up with did?
Well, okay, I mean the hellfire and brimstone.
The Bible the Bible defines hell as separation from God.
Death as separation from God, more specifically, right?
Well, hell itself is separation from God.
Right, but I'm going back to, if we're going to get into what the words mean and all that, right? The way I've always had it explained to me in very specific terms is the concept of death is being apart from God, right? And that's why death is the ultimate horrible thing, because how could you want to spend an eternity away from the love of God, right? And
but that's also, and I agree with that definition, but that's also what hell is. That's why it's called the second death.
Okay.
And this and maybe I need to flesh out my setup a little better. The goal in the Bible, the goal of eternal life, it's not, as is commonly thought, going away to an afterlife as a disembodied soul or spirit. It's resurrection to eternal life here, embodied in this world renewed, and condemnation, hell. And people can debate whether the lake of fire is metaphorical for that, because Jesus himself, he uses the language of the fires of Gehenna, which was Gehenna was a valley outside of the city of Jerusalem. Some people say it was a garbage dump, but it was, I haven't been able to find a source for that, but it was a valley where they would sacrifice to Moloch and other false gods, and it was condemned. And so it was seen as a place of final judgment. He also uses the language of outer darkness. Paul in First Thessalonians 1:9, I think, he talks about how the damned will be shut out from the glorious presence of the Lord for eternity. And that's basically what death and hell are, being it's being shut out from God's presence, which could be defined as non-existence, but it's, whether or not you're conscious for eternity of your non-existence or not, I think there are good arguments for and against that. But to your point, yeah, death as it's defined in the Bible is that separation from God, whereas life is eternality as, embodied as the person you are, but glorified and elevated. Whereas Hinduism, the goal is that non-existence. It's
just simply breaking the cycle for the sake of breaking the cycle.
Right.
Yeah.
Because existence itself is suffering, and the goal is to escape that suffering. And it's offered as something good. It's offered as it's called salvation and eternal life and enlightenment and immortality.
But it's literally the opposite of how we see it.
Right. Like and I'm not overstating this to say that everything that's upheld as good and valuable to be attained within the Bible is inverted in Hinduism. This is all to be avoided. That hell itself is what they're offering as salvation. And if we consider that we are at war with the spiritual forces of darkness who hate humanity and want to destroy as much of humanity as they can before the end, because they don't want to be alone in their condemnation. If you unpackage all of the stuff that Crowley taught and Madame Blavatsky and modern New Age thinking, it all basically turns into Hinduism. It's all about abolishing the ego and destroying your individual, your dissociating your individual identity and being one with everything, which is, again, in the book of Genesis, creation, life is a matter of distinction. God starting with the void, the earth was formless and empty, and darkness covered the surface of the deep, and he created light and differentiation, and everything reproduced according to its kind, and it is good, and he means for that to be eternal. Hinduism, well, that's all bad and to be escaped. And it's everything should be one and undifferentiated, i.e. uncreated in their view. And so, having just reviewed Crowley's 30 Aethers, like every one of these rituals and the visions that he reports to have had with the ritual, it's all about destroying the individual ego. Christ is depicted in these visions as a defeated and humiliated villain who led the world astray by teaching us about sin and salvation, which is illusion. And a lot of this is about going back to all the sex stuff. Crowley's big thing was freeing humanity from sexual repression. Now, I don't think you need a spiritual or demonic explanation for why humans give in to our sexual urges. That's kind of our default unless we learn to discipline them. But the innovation Crowley brought was to offer this as a way of liberation. This is a way of achieving enlightenment, is destroying every taboo, every restriction on our sexual behavior. This is just a barrier to enlightenment. And so to achieve enlightenment, you have to transgress every possible restriction on your sexual urges. And his religion, as Dre mentioned, he called it thelema, which is from the Greek word for will. The goal of his religion is to achieve the true will, like in everybody, which is kind of the opposite of the one thing all religions have in common. Anything that, sorry, go ahead, Dre.
But that true will has to do with your your destiny or your purpose, where you're supposed to be, and not necessarily, and even and this is in Crowley's words too, it doesn't refer specifically to the hedonism of the sex act itself, but to, I guess, shed all the norms so that you can go beyond those types of desires and do what a true will would have you do.
Right. That's a good point. Like he
So
saw
it's not
things,
like sex wasn't the goal. The goal was go beyond sex.
right. But the goal of it was like society telling you you shouldn't do that. If you do that, we'll shame you and disapprove of you. Well, that's an impediment to your true will. Society itself and these external pressures that restrict your will, those are things that are to be cast off. And so if you can shed those taboos, if you can break those barriers, yes, the sex act itself is not the purpose. The purpose is the purpose is the rebellion.
But I guess my question is, like, why stop at sex? That's not the only thing that, I mean, why not kill somebody? Why not steal things? Why not lie? Why not do all the things that, you know, he claims would be you know, a break of the social contract? And if you were in your true will, you wouldn't want to break the social contract, right?
Well, I think to me, it's an easy answer, right? It's a cop out.
I agree, which is why I was asking those questions rhetorically.
I mean, that's 100%. It's like, yeah, I'm super edgy, and I'm gonna do anything I want up until the point of sex, but I'm not gonna do all the things that are gonna put my ass in jail or get me executed or, you know, locked up, or my friends won't talk to me or my family embarrassed, right? Like sex is one thing, but, you know, killing somebody or, you know, sabotage or arson, you start crossing the lines into, you know, violence upon other humans, right? As long as everybody at the orgy is consenting, it's a totally different animal.
That's what, yeah. And Crowley would, you know, if asked, would say things like, yeah, don't do that. That's not in keeping with it. He claimed to be pro-human, but not all Crowleyites think that way. A lot of, I mean, that those are, you know, those questions
they got to take it too far. It's why we can't have nice things, right?
Yeah. Who are those? Remember those kids who, I mean, they weren't really Crowley's fault, but Leopold and what's his name, who they were really into Nietzsche, and they took his idea of the Übermensch and being beyond good and evil. I think it was in like the 1920s or 30s, in the United States. These couple of kids who, like teenagers, were really into Nietzsche and took his idea of being beyond good and evil and becoming an Übermensch really seriously, and they killed somebody to achieve this. And but yeah, I mean,
but all of this stuff always seems to link back, right? Like the Black Dahlia and I mean, any of these you know, even newer, right? But anytime you look at historically any of these cult, they're always backlinked, and you can always backchain them back into the same things at the end of the day, right? Like whether it's Crowley or Nietzsche or Charles Manson,
yeah,
right? Like, I mean, that dude was tapping on these same things when he was running his
for all of their claims to originality and enlightenment. There's only like a few basic ideas.
But what's really funny is if you pull that thread long enough, it almost feels like it goes all the way back to Eden. It's almost like all of it goes into the same little linear chain all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah, that's basically my point, is that once you cut through all the crap and all the window dressing and Dungeons and Dragons costumes and ritual and secrecy and all the inside baseball jargon of Crowley and Blavatsky and New Ageism and even John Dee and the Hermetic alchemists, it's all the same stuff that you're reading about in the Bible. It's the same basic conflicts. But to Dre's question, if you read Crowley's 30 Aethers and he's seeing these visions, one of the visions he worshipped, what's funny is he's so hostile to Christianity, and much of his enlightenment comes in teaching people the lies and illusions of Christianity, but he is 100% dependent on Christian symbolism and language, and he worshipped the whore of Babylon as a goddess and the mother of the Messiah of the new age. But of course, he has to rely on the Book of Revelation to do this.
But he grew up in an uber Christian household,
Right.
which he seems to be rebelling against as he's doing more drugs and getting his own vision. I mean, my man went to Egypt, went to the pyramid, and that's when Horus like actually talked to him, right? And he had to like write that down. That was in 1904.
Yeah. Well, technically, it was his wife that Horus spoke through.
Like right, because he was on his honeymoon, right? That was the more sex.
Right. That's when he got the Book of the Law, so he says. But yeah, Horus is the god of his new eon. But if you look in his visions, like murder is kind of a big deal. Like he doesn't outright say go out and murder, but the imagery of the whore of Babylon holding the cup full of the blood of Christians, that's a big deal for him. Like he's really excited about Christians getting murdered. That's one of the things that definitely comes out of his visions. But
kids, don't do heroin.
To be fair,
peyote, heroin, LSD.
He didn't get into heroin until later.
Well, I mean, because all the other stuff was too soft. He's like, wait, there's some new shit that'll actually take my mind to another place.
Yeah,
he hadn't talked to Horus in a while.
But at the end of the day, yeah, as you alluded, he's really just a spoiled kid who's mad at his mom, who his overbearing. He's
a satanic Cartman.
Yeah, essentially. Well, except Cartman's mom was indulgent, but yeah, his mom had typical Christian Victorian ideas about sex. And so he spent his entire life basically rebelling against them. Like,
and he wanted to do gay sex too, right? So it was like, well, Christians say I can't do gay sex, but the whore of Babylon, commanded me to do gay sex.
Yeah, one of the major aspects of these rituals where he was inducing these visions in which his holy guardian angel Awas spoke to him and gave him these visions. Part of destroying his ego and destroying and breaking these taboos was, as part of the ritual, he had his disciples sodomize him.
Yeah, that might destroy my ego as well.
Yeah,
I can appreciate that train of thought.
And
I'd like my ego intact, though. Thanks.
Right? And this figures pretty prominently on all of his, like, homosexual sex magic was like his big insight. That I forgot the guy's name. He was the leader of the Ordo Templi Orientis.
The OTO. You talking about Smith?
Not Smith. It's a German guy. Anyway, he read in Crowley's newsletter, The Equinox. Crowley wrote about this being sodomized to destroy your ego. And also, like, sex magic has to do with visualizing what you want through the ritual at the point of orgasm is supposed to give you power to achieve it. And this is kind of a major feature of sex magic. But anyway, Crowley wrote about his insights, if you can call it that, about being sodomized for the purpose of visionary experience and magical power. The leader of the OTO read this, and
Karl Kellner?
I think that's him. Yeah. He visited him and kind of chided him for giving away their secrets. And Crowley, nobody told me that. I came up with it. And according to Crowley, he appointed him chief ninth degree, whatever in their order, and made him the leader of it. And so that became a major moneymaker for Crowley later on. But yeah, so the overall pattern here is, well, okay, so this, just to back up a little bit, to sort of reestablish our basic principles. Christianity, the problem of the human condition is that in the fall, we were made in the image of God, but we fell, and we're enslaved to our instincts and appetites. We've basically become animalistic again. And being saved means we receive the Holy Spirit, we're born again, and we have the divine nature. And now it's a matter of participating in the divine nature and overcoming our animal instincts. And Second Peter, he describes the Christian life in terms of participation in the divine nature and escaping the corruption that's in the world because of appetites. And you see this constant contrast between the saints, the people of God who live in the Spirit, and the people of the world who live like animals. They're creatures of instinct and appetite. And that's why Daniel's vision, it's of the four beasts, followed by the kingdom of the Son of Man. The Antichrist is called the beast. It's all about our animalistic nature versus our elevated, inherited divine nature. And so that's the whole goal, is we become more human. We evolve. And in so doing, we are remade in the image of Christ.
More human or less human? I mean, I get what you're saying, I don't want to split hairs on that, but you're saying become more human, but we are all of those animalistic things by default. Yeah.
Well,
I guess it depends on where you're starting from, going back to the fall. Never mind.
Right,
I get what the idea of what the perfect version of humanity was supposed to have been as compared to what it has become.
Exactly. As we are in our fallen state, we are not God's design for humanity. We're animalistic.
I think I like using the word divine more, right? Like, because I think just for general conversation purposes, I get where you're going, but when we say divine, I think that usually gives the connotation of being holy or being like God, right? Versus humans are earthly and worldly and broken.
But I would, the counterpoint to that would be that we think of ourselves, like humans typically think of ourselves as being rational, as being good, being.
I don't.
That's
the average human might think that. Yeah, well, I tend to have a much more low view of humanity.
I agree, but people are offended by that precisely because of the conceit of what a human is, and in believing themselves to be that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the problem of the human condition, according to Christianity, is that no, you're not. We're animals. We're not supposed to be. We're not supposed to be. We're supposed to be above the animals, made in the image of God, but we're not.
I run into this whenever I have conversations with folks about dogs, right? So for those that don't know, I'm a dog trainer in my quote unquote free time. I've also got a nonprofit service dog organization that my wife and I run. But when I talk about
description,
yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brian. Yeah. But when I use training theory conversations, and I'm talking about a dog and how to train this dog and how to use operant conditioning and classical conditioning and basic learning theory and all these things, and I switch in and out of humans and dogs, and people go, well, wait a minute, we're talking about dogs, not people. And I'm like, you think there's a difference? Like, learning theory is consistent across organisms. It's just a question of how much cognitive and spatial ability the subject has relative to the trainer, right? Like, that's all we're getting into, is like, who can outthink the other. But we are clearly a part of the animal kingdom. There's no two ways about it. Whether or not we're supposed to dwell in that is a different conversation, and that's a philosophical question, not a scientific question.
And this is something I think we ought to do a whole episode on just that. I mean,
it's funny how this keeps happening, huh?
Well, a really good follow-up to this would be to kind of talk about I mean, the church is supposed to be the Christian life, and the church as the purveyor of the Christian life. It's supposed to be empowering us to be more human. It's supposed to be, for
divine human, not beast human, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Like in Second Peter, and I love this passage, and there was at one point I had the whole thing memorized in Greek because it's like I'm that into it.
So Brian needs a girlfriend for those that are interested out there.
I mean, I just got gay over there. Greek. Wow.
So 2 Peter 1:3, his divine power has given us everything needed for life and godliness through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and excellence. Through these, he has given us his very great and precious promises, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature and escape the corruption of the world caused by appetites. For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith excellence, to excellence knowledge, to knowledge self-mastery, to self-mastery perseverance, to perseverance godliness, to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness love. And each one of those terms in the Greek, it's got there like an entire sermon could be preached on what it means.
Mm-hmm.
Like make every effort to add to your faith excellence. Some translate it as goodness, some as virtue. The Greek is arete, which if you know anything about like classical Greek pedagogic system.
Yeah, I know tons about that.
Well, you probably know more.
I was going to say we probably need a whole episode on that because
I mean,
I can run off on that for hours.
That's my middle name, pedagogue.
Well, the classical Greek education for boys and young men was the cultivation of this quality called arete, and Plato had this whole thing about what arete is. Like the arete, the excellence of a horse is different than that of a man. The excellence of a warrior is different than that of a scholar or a philosopher, so on and so forth. But like the picture you get from that is that the entire Christian life, this process, this participation in the divine nature is this progressive process of cultivating these qualities that are consistent with his nature. And the church is supposed to empower us and equip us and mentor us in that, which is totally foreign to our concept of the church. But that's, let's put a pin in that for another day, because that's
arete. I did a little quick searching while you were talking. Basically, it's a word that means being the best version of yourself. Whatever it is that you're good at, be the best at it. Be the most virtuous, the most moralistic, the most XYZ person possible.
That's a good summary. Yeah.
That's what I do. I summarize. That's my second middle name.
Within the context of Christianity, within the context of Christianity and the church, I would say it's finding your spiritual gift, finding how you can be of service within the body. And then you add to that knowledge, and then to that self-mastery, so on and so forth.
So I'd actually like to do a little, we've never done this on this show. So let me, what do we call this in the world? A little, anyway, let me tell you a little story. So my church, and I've mentioned my church a couple of times. We've just changed names because we merged with two churches have merged together. So the church is now called City Church. It's in Moore, Oklahoma. Link in the description. And one of the things that we've always talked about is, finding your God-given talents and maximizing them, right? Because we all have a reason for existence. And I remember sitting down and talking to my pastor at a 4th of July picnic. And I was like, yeah, here's the thing. I'm not really a people person. And like the skills that I have, I'm not saying I'm Liam Neeson, but like I got a special set of skills and they're not really church related. So like, I don't know what to do for you. Right. And he kind of laughed. And what I ended up settling on was helping with our production in our online services. Right. And it was something that it's kind of high stress because there's a lot of moving parts, and I dig stress and I kind of absorb it really well. But it's not I'm not out talking to people. It's not touchy feely. I'm not having to like greet people. I'm not getting called to go talk to people in the hospital or, with grieving people. I'm not the prayer team when people need to pray. They don't come talk to me because I don't belong there either. Right. But it was kind of funny to me because I was thinking about it the other day, and, while what I do for the church isn't necessarily, it's not even really all that noticed, but what I do is I put our message out on the internet for a lot of people to see. Right. So when I thought about it in those terms, I was like, well, that's kind of cool, actually, because I'm helping get this, this message of a church that I believe in, a pastor that I believe in, and getting it out to more listeners, to more viewership. But then when this show started, I saw a really natural kind of connection between the two, right? A lot of my drive or interest in setting up this podcast was driven by well, look, I can put a church service on the internet. How hard could it be to put a podcast on the internet? Right. And so it was almost like the two were linked, that I don't know exactly what my skill is or what my gift is in putting this thing online, but if nothing else, it was causing this conversation to happen online. Right. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I wouldn't undersell that.
No, I mean, I'm really not trying to undersell it. I'm just kind of saying it was kind of neat. It was more of me just doing something because it felt like the right thing to do, and it's turned into goodness, right? Like it's turned into, I shouldn't say goodness in the sense of, I'm not trying to pretend that this podcast is like divinely inspired, although I do personally think it is.
I'm having a good time.
I think the idea of, and we've talked about this, the three of us, just offline, right? But like the idea of just getting people to think and getting people to listen, right? So quick story, Brian. My brother John calls me the other day, and I'm driving, he's driving, and he's like, hey, so I was listening to your show the other day, and he goes, not for nothing, but it caused me to go off into a tangent. And he goes, what in the hell's going on in Matthew 27? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he goes, there's zombies. He goes, so Jesus died on the cross and then zombies came out of the ground and started running around in town?
They're not zombies, but
it was Michael Jackson Thriller going on.
First of all, that's literally what it says. That dead saints rose and went into town and were noticed, right? But put a pin in it. We don't need to break down the verse. But my point is simply that it caused him to go and look, and he was, searching, and he was looking, and he started hitting new things that he had never seen before. And I think that's like it's a wonderful thing, irrespective of the how, right? It's the what. And that's why the close that I've been putting on the end of our shows is just that. It's like, I hope you take something away and go think about something, right? Even if it's not even what we're talking about, even if the only reason you open your Bible is to prove everything that I say wrong. Cool. You opened your Bible, right? It's like I feel like Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean. You guys are the worst evangelicals I've ever heard of, but you've heard of us.
Yeah. Well, and to your spiritual gifts, I'll be honest, when you guys were talking about, hey, we need to set this up on social media and somebody do that, and I was just like, I don't want to do that. I don't know why. It's just like it just seems like it's just not my thing. It's just not something I want to do. And I just feel totally resistance to doing it, and I can't say why.
Brian, I think you and I
do that.
I think you and I are real similar in that I've never been a look at me kind of guy. I've always been a look. I just do my thing, and you can.
Hey, what are you clowns implying?
I implied nothing.
What are you implying?
Hey, if the single glove with glitter fits, Dre, wear it. Like, I'm just saying.
I think he's saying that you got the in our little surrogate family here, you got all the charisma in the family.
Hey, whoa! I got plenty of charisma. It's just not directed,
pointed differently. Yeah,
right. Yeah, my focus is my beam is different than Dre's. But
I'm a front man. I can't play guitar.
And
I can lay down those nasty solos.
And for the kids at home who are just listening and can't see us, I got all the looks.
He does, absolutely. When y'all see the videos, which you will see soon,
right?
You'll know that to be true.
Thanks for playing along, guys. Appreciate that.
I mean, it's classical. I mean, he's white, so of course. How to get racist with it? Whatever.
All right. Well, I didn't go there. I'm just gonna.
I went there, and I'll go there again.
I feel like I'm asking myself the question: what would Crowley do?
And so
He'd
so what
poop,
is
he'd poop in it on the rug and throw it at you.
where's Crowley today?
He's
Him-
dead,
him
but
dead?
he's gonna be roasting
I
in
know
the lake of
he's
fire one
dead.
day.
Well, whoa! I thought there was no Lake of Fire.
I didn't, who said that?
You did.
I didn't say there's no lake of fire. I said it's debatable if it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for
Right.
something. I mean, it doesn't mean there's no lake of fire. It just means that the outcome isn't exactly literally a lake of fire.
What do we see today
Well-
that harkens back to Crowley?
Well, I'm
And
glad
keep
you
in mind
asked that.
keep in mind we're American, right? And that dude was British.
Well,
So we're a little different.
this actually follows right after the point I was making about how Christianity is about teaching us to cultivate these qualities that make us more human in the sense of God's design, more human in the original divine sense. It's about overcoming our animal nature. Crowley, and particularly the influence of the spiritual forces of darkness that always have influence when humans seek this secret knowledge from angels, it always leads to sexual perversion as a supposed means of liberation. Like you see this with Dee and Kelly in the 16th century. Like they're getting these visions from angels, giving them their Enochian magic. Near the end of it, they told they demanded that Crowley and not Crowley, Dee and Kelly swap wives, and this is going to show their solidarity, their singularity of purpose for the messianic work before them, and they wound up doing it, and it went bad for them. It didn't go well. But
Wait, why swapping doesn't end well?
that seems to be the lesson of history. Yeah.
Who would have thought it?
Yeah. Well, actually, Dee and Kelly thought that. They were both like, no, we don't want to do this. But then they wound up doing it because they, well,
I think the ladies wanted to do it, and they just said yes.
Well, not according to the record, but
well, I mean, come on, it's the medieval period. Women didn't really get to put their shit in the record. It's fine. And Kelly and Dee didn't want to seem like they were total cucks. So this when we were told to do it by deities, and we picked.
Yeah.
Even though they were getting sodomized by their wives. Whatever.
They had to keep that ego down.
That's right.
You got to keep that ego in check.
I 100% believe that they were, and until I'm proven wrong one day.
Okay, so Crowley really developed this idea of sexual perversion. Of course, he didn't say perversion, but liberation from sexual repression as a way to enlightenment, which kind of echoes the what the Second Peter, where he talks about the false teachers who promise freedom, but they themselves are slaves of depravity. This idea of, like I said, you don't really need a religious or a demonic explanation for why people give in to their base urges, but this idea of giving into them as a means to enlightenment, that's a pretty unique thing, especially like in Victorian England, which is where Crowley came from.
Or a means to power, or a means to attract. I mean, so have you heard about Jack Parsons, the Crowleyite here in America in the 30s and 40s?
Yeah, he was. Interestingly, Parsons and L. Ron. I don't want to steal your thunder. You're probably going to talk about this. Go ahead.
Well, so I mean, dude was born in like 1914 to like affluent parents in the Southern California area. So, and he was like crazy smart, but didn't want to listen to his parents. Around middle school, my man, no shit, made a deal with the devil. So I don't know if he went to went to God first and like, hey, I want to go to the moon. Because in the 1920s, talk about going to the moon is the same thing as talking to like angels and demons. You're out of your mind. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And since this guy was such a fantasy fan and a fan of like science fiction, he really wanted to go to the moon. I mean, he couldn't even get his name straight, right? He was born Marvel.
Science fiction existed in the 1910, 1920s? It's a genuine question. I thought science fiction came about in like the 40s.
I mean, Marvell Whiteside Parsons, he did, but then his dad left, and his mom's like, I don't like that name Marvel because he was named after your dad, so I'm gonna go ahead and call you John. And he's like, John's cool, but I don't want to be called John. I'm gonna be called Jack. So John Jack Marvel Parsons.
John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt.
Yeah, he went to say, and he said, listen, if you can I will sell my soul to you if you give me the ability to get to the moon. So then the dude became obsessed with like rocketry. So by the time he got into high school, he went to like a military academy where he blew up the toilet. And not in a metaphorical sense, he literally blew up the toilet.
That Taco Bell back then?
Yeah, he it wasn't like, man, you can't handle military food, so you got to leave. No, he got kicked out because he put explosives in the toilet and blew that thing up. And they had no money because in 1929, of course, we had the Great Depression.
Well,
so the family
not blowing up a toilet though.
The family lost their fortune, but my man was still smart, and he had to drop out of school, and he really wanted to go to Caltech because at the time the Caltech in Los Angeles was the big rocket, the lab, right? Mm-hmm. And he knew a couple of dudes that went to that school, so he just hung out with them and just blew shit up out in other places out by lakes. So much so that he garnered the attention of the government. The government's like, I noticed you blow up a lot of shit. How are you doing that? And so much so that he blew that stuff up so often, and the government gave a dime to it and actually formed NASA later. I mean, dude was making collect calls to Werner von Braun.
So in all seriousness, though, this is a funny thought experiment, right? So for all intents and purposes, self-admitted, this guy sold his soul to the devil, whatever that means, for this knowledge. And he was the essentially the founder of the Jet Propulsion Lab, the JPL, which still exists.
He was a founder,
but a founder.
Sure. So with no formal training,
no, that's fine. But my point is, like, in this culture today, how we cancel things because of its ties to racism and Nazism, like NASA is of the devil. Like, you could make that leap just as easily.
Dude, this sounds, right? Not to nerd out, but Captain America, Winter Soldier, where it turns out that like SHIELD is made up of
spoilers.
Yeah, sorry everybody. Spoiler alert for for this like 15-year-old movie. But that, like, this idea of this in the movie it's American, but in the comics it's basically NATO, but this American military intelligence apparatus being made up of America's enemies, that's 100% legit, like historically accurate for a lot of American institutions, including NASA. Like, without Nazi rocket scientists, there's no NASA. There's no NASA.
Right, but also without the devil, apparently.
Apparently.
And Jack Parsons actually created like a little canisters that had jet propulsion in them before we had jets. Mm-hmm. And
he invented solid state fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Right. With just a couple bros from Caltech blowing shit up.
So crazy. Yeah. So I have a funny quick story about solid fuel cores, as strange as that is as a segue. So
I do have a point that relates to.
I gotta tell the story. Let me tell the story real fast.
Like six anecdotes ago.
Yeah,
but
we're gonna get there.
I just want to put my bid in and just let you guys know it's coming.
So I'm in Vandenberg Air Force Base. So anybody that knows anything about rockets, right? Like that's where we put Titans into space from, is from Vandenberg Air Force Base. It's in the central coast of California. And I think they're still building Titan 2s there. But anyway, it's where we launch a lot of stuff from, or build it anyway, if not launch it. But it's one of the secondary sites for the West Coast also. Man, I can't find the right color hue there. So when you go in these different buildings, you know, typical government facility, they give you safety briefs everywhere, right? So you have to have all these clearances, and you go in these buildings, they give you safety briefs. Well, I'm in this building and they're like, all right, look, here's your safety brief. This is building whatever the number is. We actually do the final assembly of the solid fuel cores. And the guy just sits and looks at me, and I'm like, okay. He goes, we have an alarm system. If you hear an alarm with 3 beeps, that means there's a perimeter fence breach. It happens because people are always trying to either protest or break in. And, you know, the hippies hate us. They hate us because they ain't us or whatever, right? But like they're always having security problems. I'm sure some of it is, you know, third world, external countries, advanced persistent threats and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, he gets down to, if you hear one continuous horn, that is the fire alarm. In the case of a fire, find the nearest exit, pick a straight line, and run as fast as you can.
None of this like in an orderly fashion.
He was
Don't
like,
panic. He's like, no, panic like a motherfucker. Get out.
And I was in my mid 20s at the time, like late 20s. Like I wouldn't fire to the Marine Corps at this point. And I looked at him and I said, you're serious, right? And he goes, yeah, we make solid fuel cores. I said, how many people do you think are going to make it out of this building? And he kind of looks at me and he goes, you might make it, because everybody else was a lot older and heavier. He goes, you got a shot. He goes, most of them you don't.
If you're aggressive and you're not afraid to knock people down,
I was getting out.
you might have his chance.
I was gonna channel my inner Ludicrous.
Well, I mean, it's
throw them bows.
It's the book of the law. It's your will.
Right.
Your will says you got to get out of there.
It's just one of the funniest things I've ever had happen. He just, pick a straight line and run as fast as you can. I was like, that's a hell of a safety brief.
My man Parsons made a fortune off selling these canisters. So then he bought this mansion with 11 rooms in it called the Parsonage. And at this time he married a chick named Helen, and she and him kind of went to one of these OTOs that was kind of started by Crowley, and he kind of got into Crowley, started writing him letters, even saying things like, hey, you're my dear beloved father, signed your son, right? So he was like, Crowley's my guy. I'm all in on feeling. In fact, this place that we have here is super shitty, and I want to move this operation to my 11-room house that I named the Parsonage. He calls this thing the Parsonage, and starts bringing people over to have a bunch of sex orgies. One of the women is his wife's little sister, who's probably about 16 years old, and decides, I'm going to get with her. So his wife promptly leaves him.
I think she was
for
15, actually.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
underage is what she was.
I remember that distinctly. She was well underage.
Betty.
Not
Susie,
even driving yet.
Betty. Yeah. He actually put an ad out to rent rooms, and I think the ad says something about, hey, only bohemians, actors, anarchists, communists, no mundane people, no mundane allowed. You have to be out there if you want to.
You got to be
if you want to rent. You it's a must. And
by the way, footnote: Betty was his Scarlet Woman.
Really? What is
the
that?
Babylon to his beast.
No, that wasn't Betty.
Wasn't it Betty?
No,
I'll let you go. I'll let you tell the story. Sorry.
And where'd she go? What's her name? Anyway, people that rented rooms, one guy by the name of Fred Gwynn. And for anybody who's older listening, they know that Fred Gwynn is also Herman Munster, and he also two Eudes, the judge on My Cousin Vinny. And he
excuse me, what is a Ute?
Yeah, son, are you on drugs? And Parsons like, yeah, I'm on lots of drugs. Always. And another guy was on leave in the Navy by the name of L. Ron Hubbard. Yes, you heard that right. L. Ron Hubbard rented a room there, and they decided that they were going to go bring on Babylon, the whore of Babylon, and bring her about. So they were going to do these rituals, and Crowley actually told them no. Like, hey, Jack,
can I
you're
insert
not
some
ready.
background here?
Yeah, of course.
That will make it more meaningful. Crowley's whole thing was he believed he was going to bring about the Aeon of Horus. His view of history that was given to him according to him, by his holy guardian angel Awas, and during his visions in Egypt, was the most primitive stage of religion was the Aeon of Isis, which was matriarchal. They worshipped goddesses, and you find this in like the oldest artifacts we have are these from like 20,000 years ago. They're these little fat goddess idols that indicated they worshipped women. They worshipped a mother goddess. The next stage
that were thick.
They were fat. They were like
I said thick. 2 C's thick.
My bad. I didn't. Lizzo is beautiful.
Brian calls that fat. Actually, there's a woman that lives with me that calls that fat as well.
So
there's this.
The next.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we gotta have some structure here, man. So
we let you talk for like 45 minutes without interrupting you.
But it was.
And this is the thanks we get.
This is my interruption.
I know this guy.
This is my interruption to Dre, and
I'm
trying to make it brief, though. I want to just keep the interruptions to a minimum. So the second age is the age of Osiris, which is patriarchal, which is characterized by the Abrahamic god, and the age of Horus is what he calls the age of the crowned and conquering child, whereas patriarchal Abrahamic religion is overthrown, Christianity is bad, sexual repression is bad. And the way to do this, and he had this whole series of visions based on D. and Kelly's Enochian magic. D. and Kelly had these series of rituals called the 30 Aethers that Crowley adapted, and he detailed these visions he had in the desert in Mexico, and then I forget the setting for the second series of vision. It doesn't matter. He had these 30 visions corresponding with the 30 Aethers, which were these rituals he performed, in which Babylon, spelled Babalon, the Scarlet Woman, this goddess of adultery and depravity and debauchery, she's going to birth Horus, the Messiah of the new Aeon, the crowned and conquering child, and this age will be characterized by every individual exerting their true will, casting off all sexual repression. This mentality of the world conforming to you instead of the other way around, which is the antithesis of all ancient religion in its basic premise. And so when we talk about how Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard were
trying to conjure Babylon. They wanted to bring her into existence by doing these rituals out there in near it was a lake somewhere in Los Angeles that was dammed up. So they found a like clearing. They also blew stuff up there, and then they did these rituals to bring on Babylon. After they do these rituals, Elron was like, "Hey, I have a business proposal for you, and I need an investor. I've got a little bit of money. I just need about 20K from you," which was, pretty close to 400 grand in today's time. And because what I want to do is I want to go to Florida, and I'm going to buy up sailboats, like schooners, and then I'll sail them through the Panama Canal, and I'll bring them up the coast of California, and we'll sell them together, and we'll make all kinds of money. So Parsons is like, "Yeah, it's great. You're my friend. We're bringing on Babylon. It's going to be fun. It's going to be great." So he gives him 20K, and then he leaves with young Betty.
Should I got a contract, Jack?
Yeah, and he's gone. and he goes to Florida not to return. Once Jack kind of figures out that he's been conned by L. Ron Hubbard, he goes out to Florida and says, "I'm going to sue you for all my money back." At which Betty says, "You're not going to sue
Dre,
me."
wait a minute, Dre.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Are you telling us right now that the founder of Scientology was not an honest man?
What I'm saying is that maybe he really thought there was an investment and he had more work to do before he did this, and perhaps Jack Parsons accidentally funded the beginning of Scientology, because through this boat business, Elron, my man, Mr. Hubbard, he made a lot of money, and he was able to write his Dianetics, to which he sold a lot, and then created this religion. But Parsons actually went out there and confronted them. And Betty said, you're not gonna sue me, because if you do that, I'm gonna tell everyone that you had sex with me when I was underage. And he says, okay, I'm not gonna sue you, but Elron, you are getting sued. But the problem is, when he showed up, he couldn't find them naturally. And somebody at the dock or the pier said that, yeah, Elron and Betty, they're out yonder. So my man, as the story goes, stood on the pier, chanted a few words, and actually created a storm to make Elron crash, and had to come back. He's like, hey, I made you crash because I summoned whatever. I mean, don't you remember I sold my soul to the devil back when I was 12? Like, bruh, can't mess with me.
You forgot I'm connected?
So what's funny is that Elron actually went back with Parsons. I think that's when they did, not before, but I think that's when they actually went out to the little area and summoned Babylon. So this girl Marjorie Cameron comes along, and she's an actress.
That's right.
Former Navy.
You're correct. That was the Scarlet Woman.
And she had red hair and deep blue eyes, and they met at the parsonage through some friends, and then they spent 2 weeks in Jack's room doing nothing but the lovemaking, the sex part of our drug, sex, and magic, because he believed that that's who he summoned. And she just went with it, like, yeah, for sure. So she was going to birth the Antichrist through Jack Parsons, and she honestly believed this was going to happen. And she made a few films, a short film, a couple of movies in Hollywood. She acted with, I think, Dennis Hopper. She has an art gallery in Los Angeles still today. She's dead, but yeah, her own poetry and like her own things about her husband Jack.
By the way, through all of this, they're sending checks to England to Crowley.
Yes, and then they had a falling out because he actually, Jack Parsons believed that Crowley was too hierarchical. Basically, like, hey, that's not will, that's to you. Which is why when he dabbled into communism, he's like, actually, that's not communism, that's totalitarianism. So nope, I'm not about you either. Because he worked for the government, he got spied on a lot by the FBI and got questioned about his red stuff, especially in the 40s and then in the early 50s before he died. I'm going to back up really quick. And when he was 24 years old, he was a key witness in a corrupt police officer case in Los Angeles. And this cop basically got accused of blowing somebody up in a car, and they didn't have anybody who was a expert bomb witness. So they went to the dude that blew up toilets, and they asked him. They said, hey, you think you would have done this? And my man's like, yeah, if he did, because this is how I would do it. And they're like, yep, key witness, you're going up the river. Well, there wasn't a lot of sex magic stuff and not a lot of movie pyrotechnics at that time. So he did little stuff on the side, ended up working like in a gas station overnight. And allegedly, while he was doing some kind of project, he dropped one of his canisters and he blew himself up. And, plenty of people, there's a long line that forms to the left on people that want Jack Parsons dead, and maybe even the devil. And now he's gone. But he was into Kinsey. He thought that Kinsey was spot on.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves on Kinsey, though.
Yeah,
Jack Parsons' last words, do you know what they were?
I'm not done.
Yeah.
That's what he said when he blew himself up?
He said, I'm not
he,
done
he
yet.
didn't die when he was blown up.
Oh,
But then when he was
that makes more sense. I was like, that's a weird thing to say before you blow up.
Oh,
hey dude,
he survived for a little bit.
I'm not done.
He survived, and he's like, I'm not done.
Oh,
which is kind of the inverse of Christ's words on the cross. It is finished.
Okay. I mean, and Gandhi's last words were, "My God."
Well, but the point is, like, the reason that's a little interesting is not a lot.
Sam Cooke's last words were, "Lady, you shot me."
Well, Jack Parsons, he was trying to bring about the Antichrist.
Yes.
And he hadn't pulled it off yet.
And his last words were the inverse of Christ's last words on the cross. It's worth noting. Was he planning those to be his last words? I don't know, but those were his reported last words.
NASA, jet fuel, rocketry, Scientology, of the devil.
That's a lot.
The Munsters.
My cousin Vinny.
Yeah. Damn it.
And so,
son of a bitch.
Positrack.
Like a lot of Thelemites will object to Crowley being called a devil worshiper.
And that's fine, because Parsons didn't necessarily worship the devil more than he just said
made a business transaction.
He made a transaction, and then he became rich and squandered it all on drugs and magic and sex.
Well, Crowley
in Scientology
believed in.
He didn't really squander it. I mean, he got what's the word I'm looking for?
Cucked, duped, ripped off, scammed.
Hornswoggled.
Sure. Yeah, he got scammed.
Maybe the new conspiracy is L. Ron Hubbard killed him. That's what.
So Crowley believed.
Hopefully, Tom Cruise doesn't come and kick my ass. That's what.
He's only this tall.
I mean, have you seen his movies?
I have.
Yeah, and he sold his soul to the devil, clearly. Because
I mean, he might have. He might have.
You know what I'm saying?
He got a lot for it, though. I mean, he did. He makes good movies.
As devil deals go, Tom Cruise seems to have done better than most.
I hope he gets it back. I hope it's just like in Hawk and he can like get it out. I like
Tom Cruise. Hawk. The devil runs a pawn shop.
Yeah.
You got a ticket. You're like, hey, want my soul?
Oh, I made all this money for you, dog. Just help me back out with my soul. But you know what's really a common thread with these clowns is to look at all these things that Jack Parsons is tied to, and he actually gets no credit for any of it, and he died a major loser. The dude's a loser. Like, I mean, he did all this stuff.
It makes you wonder, like, was Nikolai Tesla in the same world? I mean, similar ending, right? For somebody who was like essentially an alien.
I think Tesla was from the future and we're just trying to get back.
I mean, that's entirely possible.
But so Crowley worshipped. He claimed that there was a sort of trinity of gods that he worshipped. Nuit
sounds familiar.
Nuit, who is infinite space, Hadit, who is an infinitesimal point, and Conor Hewitt or something like that, who is the amalgamation of the two, who he identified with the Egyptian god Set, Horus, and Satan, and this was the crowned and conquering child of his new aeon. So Crowley was in fact a devil worshiper, according to Crowley.
For sure.
He just kind of rearranged the cosmology and the narrative around it to cast Jesus as the villain. But so my point about how Christianity is supposed to be about mentoring you and participation in the divine nature and becoming fully human and taking command of your appetites and instincts and subjugating them to your reason and your own will in service to God. It's supposed to empower you. It's supposed to raise you above your animal nature. Crowley's whole thing was giving into it, is making that is, you know, your sexual impulse is absolute as part of your true will. You become you serve your true will, you become your true self by, you know, by becoming liberated from sexual repression. Kenneth Anger was a filmmaker in the early 20th century who was a self-avowed Satanist and follower of Aleister Crowley. He was close friends with the particular guy by the name of Alfred Kinsey. Alfred Kinsey, of course, being the father of the sexual revolution. Published a bunch of quote unquote scientific studies about human sexual proclivities, sexual practices. He paid a bunch of pedophiles for their notes on their misadventures with children. It's debatable whether Kinsey got his ideas from Crowley or whether he was just an admirer of Crowley because he arrived at the same ideas independently. He, you know, Kinsey hasn't told us what his thought processes were, but it's a fact that Kinsey and Kenneth Anger were very close. There are photographs of Kinsey and Kenneth Anger visiting the Abbey of Thelema, which was a villa in Italy that Crowley had owned, and basically it was his cult compound. Did a bunch of his rituals. He had a bunch of disciples there. There's still paintings on the walls that he did. He had this room that was his. It was like a room full of horrors, and people were supposed to paint their worst nightmares on it. It was supposed to be a way of conquering fear, but it's reportedly haunted. But there are pictures of Kinsey and Anger in the Abbey of Thelema, getting their picture taken with a portrait of Crowley. So Crowley's ideas they're quite influential on Kinsey. Kinsey, and of course, Kinsey is hugely influential on our current culture. I mean, all of our ideas, you know, the LGBTQ ideology about
gender,
right,
gender
like,
identity. Yeah.
Like a lot of Crowley's ideas, like if you're influenced by LGBTQ ideology and you go back and read Crowley's ideas, they're you barely notice them because they're so boring against the backdrop of our current culture. We kind of fail to realize how starkly they contrast against anything that came before.
Who was the other guy with Kinsey? The
John Money.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to find a connection between Money and Crowley.
Well, I mean, it's through Kinsey.
Yeah, there are definitely connections from Kinsey to Money.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, it's 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon kind of thing, right? I mean, that's essentially this game that we can play with evil and immorality. It feels like, I mean, based on what we just talked about tonight, 6 degrees could get you directly to the Nephilim, right? You can go from like fallen angels to,
and it really is
gender ideology.
It really is pretty remarkable how directly all this connects back to Genesis 6 and 11. Like I said, the whole thing, it's like an M Night Shyamalan movie where
it really is. Like it's actually kind of wild. And it one step back from you're saying Genesis 6, but I'm saying Genesis like 1-2, right? Like the fall, because 6 doesn't happen without the fall.
True. Yeah. And
right?
like I talked about before, a lot of Crowley's ideas and New Age ideas and occult ideas, once you peel back all the frankly all the bullshit that's really
Mm-hmm.
it's just so much nonsense and misdirection and hand waving and ritualistic
But to me, it
bric-a-brac.
goes beyond any kind of
It-
worship, right? It turns into like the worship of the self, where everybody is
Yeah.
so self-centered in every single thing that we do, right? I mean, no fault divorce.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many you hear somebody talk about like, why are you divorced? Well, because he wasn't fulfilling me,
Mm-hmm.
or she wasn't fulfilling me, so I
Mm-hmm.
decided I'm
I
out.
was going to step out or whatever, right? It's
I'm
always it
I'm
always
done.
goes back to lack of ownership.
Right, and even we have this whole thing of self-love that's been highly promoted, and the things of you have to love yourself before you can love anybody else. So I have to go on my love myself journey, so I got to cut everybody out of my life, even my family, my spouse, my children, things of that
Which is so
nature.
crazy,
Well-
because if you think about when Christ gave us, rabbi, teacher, what's the most important lesson, right? Your most important commandment. And he said to love God above all others. And then just as important as that one is to love your brothers and your neighbors as you love yourself.
As you love yourself.
I mean, it was pretty obvious that we're designed to be selfish. Back to that point of what we've talking about, like circle this all the way back around, right? Like our natural animalistic instinct is self-preservation and self-realization. So I mentioned, again, I'm a behaviorist, I'm a dog trainer, right? Like this is Maslow 101, right? Like for those that don't know, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and whether you pronounce it Maslow or Maslov, I don't really care. Like come at me in the comments. But Abraham, right? Is it Abraham or Abraham? Whatever. But Maslow's hierarchy
potato
is all about self-actualization. And for those that don't understand it, it's basically at the tip of the pyramid is survival. So it's like, you need shelter, you need food, you need water, you need safety, you need sexual reproduction. And it's kind of up and down. If you just think about like just core animalistic needs, that's innate in every animal, every organism, even at some level, right? Like we could talk about COVID and bacteria and viruses, right? Viruses have a need to survive and to propagate. So it's not
cancer,
even
right? Yeah,
right. It's not even you don't even think about it. It's subconscious. The desire to survive and to take care of oneself is natural. So this idea that we need to go out and do this actively is insanity. Like what we need to do is think about other people and take ownership and own our own bullshit, and stop looking outward and look inward.
It's like we were doing some training way before we went into Iraq, and he's like, well, we have to train this way because we're going to Iraq, and we're not going to have those kind of days. And I'm like, bro, you can fall in on suck. That's easy to do. What we need to do is chill before we go out there and go do that stuff, because that's going to be a natural thing, having shitty days.
Working
so
12 hours, 6, 7 days
a week. I don't need to work up to have shitty days.
Right.
That's an easy thing to just go do.
It's just gonna be.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the same thing with like your self-preservation and your self-love. Like that's it's fucking natural. That's what you do. That's how you came into the world, right?
Yeah.
You cried coming out.
Babies are master manipulators. Everything that a baby and a toddler does is to manipulate adults such that baby survives. Like, it's not a negative thing. I'm not saying this to say don't feed your baby, whatever. I'm saying like their only ability to communicate is by crying, and they learn really quick how to modulate that cry to get what they need when they need it, so that they can survive and live, to grow up, so that they can then speak language, and then they can go on to become to reach that arete of whatever they're going to be, right? But it's crazy to think that that's not something that's just hardwired into us as human beings or as animals, as organisms.
He didn't respect me. She didn't say the right thing. She didn't call me how I present myself. Me, and I'm gonna let you know what you call me. It doesn't matter what you see. It matters what I tell you I am.
Right.
And that's who I am. That's what I am.
It's my personal truth. How dare you?
How dare you?
There's a paradox here that's worth pointing out, though. Like Crowley's thing is the true will. His
Right.
one of the tenets of Thelema is that every person is a star, like everybody is on their own trajectory, and the purpose is to cut out any other influence that interferes with that trajectory. But at the same time, the outcome of all of his magic, his consciousness alteration, is the destruction of the ego, is the abolition of individual identity. Matt's laughing right now.
Well, I'm laughing because of how Crowley went about reducing his ego. That's what made me laugh.
Yeah, most of this
Strap it on, baby.
Most of this is from people traveling to the Far East and getting all of these occult secrets from gurus and Tibetan masters, which is basically
from Sherpas.
Yeah. And like a lot of this knowledge that we take for granted today because we have Wikipedia, they had to physically travel to Tibet and India to get this stuff. So it wasn't as well known. It wasn't as thoroughly analyzed as we have the benefit of doing now. But he's got these two extremes that he teaches simultaneously between the true will and the self-actualization and the abolition of ego,
right?
Which are opposite. And I think a lot of the confusion that makes occultism so attractive is because Christians are confused about this too. I don't think this whole, like, the idea of you have to love yourself before you can love other people, I don't think that's so crazy. I actually think that's the basis of Christian morality.
It gets into like when you fly and when the masks fall and they say put your own mask on first. So yeah, you have to be there, right? You have to be existent. You have to be stable. But that's not, I mean, the idea of loving yourself doesn't mean like exalt yourself and put yourself out in front of everyone. It just means take care of yourself. There's a difference, and I think that's part of it.
Right.
That's
what I was
going to say. Let me explain what I mean here. I subscribe to the philosophy of Ayn Rand and her objectivism. I'm also a devout Christian.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a contradiction to most people because Ayn Rand hated Christianity. But I think she was not, I hate qualifying my remarks like that.
Then stop and get to the point.
Well, it's a tick that everybody kind of has, but I don't think I will. She was responding to a misunderstanding of Christianity, a common misunderstanding. And C.S. Lewis kind of talks about this, about how we think of Christian morality, we think of good and evil in terms of being selfless versus selfish. Christian morality is about love. Love is fundamentally rooted in the self. It's what you love. It's what you value. There is a kind of the inverse of the paradox I pointed out with Crowley. It does begin with the self. In the epistle to the Hebrews, when it talks about when Jesus went to the cross, it says that it was for the joy set before him that he endured the cross. Like he didn't, sacrifice was not an end in itself. He sacrificed to get something in return that he valued more than what he sacrificed.
Mm-hmm.
That's what all sacrifices. That's what all love is.
If there wasn't, it would be nihilistic.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. We often talk about, good and evil in terms of selfishness versus selflessness, as if negating the self is an end in itself, when that's not the case.
No, yeah, that is the reward. It's like being a parent. You sacrifice lots of stuff. You sacrifice your time, you sacrifice your money, you sacrifice emotional stability oftentimes. But the reward in the back end is your child doing something, or it's a payoff. It's a payoff at the end. And ultimately that really is for me. But I did all these things for them so that they paid me off later. So
we've had the conversation in here before about, you know, is there such a thing as being genuinely altruistic? And I don't think there is for humans, right? Because everything we're doing is a trade. We're knowingly and unknowingly making trades on everything that we do, you know? And at the end of the day, even Christians are doing all of those good things because they feel like it's the right thing to do, right? Like there's an argument that if you're being moved and you're being guided,
you got to define that.
It's not a decision, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, you think about like martyrs. You know, a martyr didn't decide. He didn't wake up one day and go, "It's a good day to die. I think I'm going to go see if I can get my head chopped off today." Like that wasn't their plan when they woke up, right? It was just they couldn't. They had to, have that resolute, decision to dig their heels in and say, I'm not going to recant this, or I'm not going to say the things you want me to say, or not say the things you don't want me to say. And they said, well, if you do or don't, we're going to kill you. And they were like, I mean, that's what it has to be, because I got to do what I got to do. But it wasn't like any of the martyrs just decided to go get martyred. Like that's insanity.
Yeah, except for those ones that stay at work until like 9 o'clock at night.
So amongst the three of us, right? So like I had a colonel, full-bird Colonel Mike Howard, super cool guy. He'll ever hear this, I don't know, but Colonel Howard, what's up? He had inside scoop that told us that the reason that Chesty Puller never got a Medal of Honor is because Headquarters Marine Corps knew he was trying to get one. And he kept putting his men into bad places. And the headquarters was like, man, Chesty, knock it off. And he was like, nah.
Kill my love of Chesty, man.
And they were like, every time he sent another one up, they were like, here's another Davy Cross, knock it off. And he was like looking for fights to get into so that he could try to win his Medal of Honor. And that's one of those things, man. I mean, again, this is lore, but this was told to me by a full-bird colonel. So, and he's a historian like nobody's business. So kind of a cool dude. Funny anecdote. His last name is Howard.
Well, screw you, Chesty Puller, wherever you are.
Whoa. Whoa.
Now that I know that.
So there was this guy.
Look on Drake's face right now. So for the kids at home in boot camp, before we hit the rack every night, we say, good night, Chesty Puller, wherever you are. Cause he's like the Marine Corps Santa Claus. Like he really is.
The Marine Corps Santa Claus. If you're good, when you wake up, Chesty will leave presents in your boots.
Yeah. You get if you're good, you get the good MREs.
Right.
If you're bad, you get the vegetarian omelet.
Yikes. 5 fingers of death.
So Matt just destroyed, you just basically told us Santa Claus was a murderous bastard.
Hey, we're peeling the covers back on everything. No stone unturned.
Yeah. So do you guys happen to remember the 2015 Super Bowl performance of Katy Perry?
Ish, yeah. It's with the sharks and stuff, right?
The shark outfit, yeah.
No, she was in a like a flaming red dress riding.
She changed outfits like 14 times.
Yeah.
Okay.
The shark thing was there also, but yeah.
Okay. Well, the part I'm remembering specifically is her on a big flaming red dress, riding a lion.
Because she had the heart of a lion, or the eye of a tiger, or eye of a lion, or whatever.
What was she singing?
That's the song.
Well, that's the song.
Okay.
By the way, I love the irony of Brian correcting and teaching me and Dre about sports ball things.
I know. No, the Super Bowl. I saw it on YouTube. Just the halftime. I don't know who played or why.
I did see it on YouTube.
Anyway, carry on.
If you go back and watch it, well, I don't recommend anybody go back.
I don't recommend anybody read Crowley's Vision in the Voice, where he details the 30 Aethers, where he saw these visions. But if you happen to have watched that, or if you ever do, I mean, if you happen to have read that, and then you go watch Katy Perry's performance, it's full of imagery from that. Like, she is full on doing a reenactment of Crowley and ritual.
Huh. Now I got to go watch it.
It makes me wonder if she knew that, or if it's just what
something that's just out there.
Choreographers and
somebody knew that.
Because Hollywood just has this thing now. This entertainment is just chock full of these things, which we see get even more and more all the time. Like my man Sam Smith in the latest
Balenciaga and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The fuck.
And yeah, I don't know how somebody was. It was so specific. Like, it's very obviously whoever designed that was familiar with Crowley,
right,
was reenacting it. And you might remember in the early to mid aughts when you were hearing all kinds of stuff about how Britney Spears and Madonna and other celebrities were huge into Kabbalah.
Right. Yeah.
Madonna, I don't remember Britney, but Britney's
Madonna big
crazy.
Time.
Yeah. Madonna still is, from what I know.
Right.
But and Kabbalah isn't so bad, but it's
interesting anyway.
Well, and there are ideas in Kabbalah that you find like in the Bible, like the gematria, for one thing. That's a huge. Kabbalah is a development of that. Like it didn't originate in Kabbalah, but that's a tributary to Kabbalah. You find in the book of Matthew.
Then there was that fat dude in the WWF.
I don't know what you're referring
Kamala,
to. It was Kamala.
Yeah.
Okay. But occultism, my point is, occultism is a major, it shows up all over the place in pop culture, and you don't recognize, if you're familiar with these concepts, you see it everywhere. I don't know.
I can't unsee it now all the time.
Yeah, exactly. The time. I don't know how seriously Katy Perry takes it. I don't know if she just thought it would be a cool thing to do a dance routine to, or if she's really considers herself an adept in Crowley and Thelemic magic. But it is out there. It is a huge influence. And the more you're familiar with it, the more you see it. LGBTQ ideology is, Crowley would be thrilled about that. It's full of his ideas. This whole idea of
Brian, there's a movie called Katy Perry, the Super Bowl, and Satan.
Oh yeah,
bruh, nice. Oh, let's review it.
The top 3 cast members are Russell Brand, Aleister Crowley, and Missy Elliott.
Aleister Crowley shows up.
Special guests: Lenny Kravitz, David Letterman, and Ryan Seacrest.
I think Seacrest was hosting.
Link will be in the description.
I'm totally watching that, and we're going to review it.
But
after you guys watch Nefarious,
Russell Brand was married to Katy Perry,
right, and which is why he's in.
And now he's like red pilled and woke. He's like awake, not woke. Yeah. He's awake. Yeah.
I think he's out of his mind still.
No, I don't. That dude is all there.
Well, he opens the opening to his podcast sounds very much like he wants to start a cult.
I mean, he might,
but he if you can look past that, he's actually turned into a pretty decent journalist. I mean,
he's maybe the most American of anybody I've ever heard talk about freedom and freedom of speech and anti-establishment.
It's interesting. Lots of foreigners are really good at that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. For the record, I really like Russell Brand and his podcast.
Yeah, it's fun.
With reservations.
Okay.
He is nuts. He is out of his mind.
I mean, he did a lot. He self-attests. He did a lot of crack and heroin.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think Russell Brand and I think we could hang out and have a great time together and become good friends and I would argue with him about a lot of fundamental things.
I think we could forget Sarah Marshall together really easily. That's-
Yeah. We should have Russell Brand as a guest on the
That would be
podcast.
fantastic.
that'd be means we made it. Means
If he-
we're there. Like,
or it means he is. It means he
Wait.
made it.
or it means he fell the fuck off. That's what.
Yeah, it's probably more likely. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't think we
That was
think
good.
we talked about sex enough. We need more sex.
I feel like we didn't. We talked about penises and
Penis.
way too much, but
Mhm.
not enough about ritualistic sex. But
What do we
know,
leave
what are you
out?
gonna
What do you guys want to? Where would you like to go? I
Like 2.5 hours later.
Well,
it's tough to go
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah.
The main points that I wanted to make are just to sum up. If you're a Christian, you know we're at war with spiritual forces of darkness. They want to destroy humanity. They want to impede the church. They do that by promoting an antagonistic view of reality and salvation, and by corrupting us to give into our animal nature. They work against the basic drive of the spirit to participate in the divine nature through discipline and reason and intentionality, teaching us to give into our appetites and animalistic natures. Western occultism is one of their main vehicles for this, although not their only vehicle. Everything about Western occultism is antagonistic to Christianity. There's this popular pluralistic view of religion in the West, where there's this idea that it's all basically the same and just different, superficially different. That's actually not true. It's the opposite of what's true. I think we covered all that pretty well. I don't think I have much more to add. I'll probably listen to this later on in the week and notice all kinds of stuff that I should have said.
We're gonna have to have midweek Brian supplemental podcast where he just talks. There might be a market for that.
Yeah. You're like, hey guys, here's all the things I forgot to say on our main show. So I wanted to throw a couple of things out there.
I think
And
you
this
guys
is
are, I think
and
you
this is
guys
my
are
own.
joking.
This is our own little cult because it's you and me. You're getting the secret knowledge from Brian, and we don't have those two clowns interrupting me every 10 seconds.
It could be only for subscribers, Brian. So you could create a special Patreon club that only gets to hear what you have to say in between our shows.
I think you guys are making fun of me, but I like it.
No.
I like the idea.
No.
I mean, it's a thing. And as of right now, you can reach us at Mount Hermeneutics on Instagram and Facebook. Also, you can email us at Mount Hermeneutics, one word, at gmail.com. And of course, on the artist formerly known as Twitter, which is now X, you can find us at Hermeneutics at X. So at M Hermeneutics. The DMs are open in all those places. Come at me, bro.
Slide in.
Yeah. Slide. And for all you little hottie Christians out there, Brian's single. He's single. So if you're modest and hottest, just go ahead, hit Brian up, slide into the DMs.
Hey.
I'll try not to read them, or I will and share them with Matt. But anyway, so
I appreciate you guys trying to hook me up. Thank you.
And no Babylons, even though I think he's into redheads, right? Like
that was a phase.
I
think
think you could
away,
consider that a cautionary tale. Thanks for listening to Mount Hermeneutics. We hope you enjoyed this show and maybe even took something away to think about. Be sure to send us feedback, both positive and negative. Like and subscribe on all the socials, and tell your friends. Until next time.